All right, hey, this is Ricky from All Sorts of Words, and I have a friend. This is the one that I was talking about who reads Spider-Man, and it's really unfortunate, but he's dedicated his life to Spider-Man and Marvel Comics, and he has a very enviable collection. I'll keep stitching in footage of this ridiculous room, but I'll introduce him now. His name's Gunter. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself, and then we're going to look at some awesome comic books. That's pretty much it.
Cool. Hey, Ricky, thanks for having me today. Nice to meet everybody. As Ricky said, I'm Gunter. I have a Spider-Man problem, which my wife is tolerable about. So,
how did you get started?
When I was a kid, I grew up in South Africa, which is different, whole different world as far as being a collector.
What city? I'll put it on. I'll put a little
Pretoria.
I'll put a doobly-doo map.
Yes, Pretoria, South Africa. Grew up there. So as a kid, we didn't get all the runs. We got select issues. So I was collecting books separately. That you didn't actually get to know. I didn't even know that there were runs of comics. So I would get like a Superman comic here, a Batman comic here, a Spider-Man comic here. So that's kind of the way I grew up, with this piecemeal group of books.
Like all mixed in, or just kind of
all mixed in.
Okay.
So that's how I thought the comic world ran. When I moved to the States, I kind of took a break from comic collecting in my late teens, early 20s. But then I'd say around 2008, I really got back into it again. And I think what really got me back in was, I have to say, Robert Downey Jr. Because he kind of, I think his personification of Iron Man was really great, and it kind of got me thinking about the old days of the comic collecting. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to get back into this. And I started reading, picking up some trades, and I just gravitated towards Peter Parker. I really loved the costume. Was the thing when I was a kid. I really loved seeing that costume. There was that 70s TV show, the Spider-Man TV show.
The animated one, or the one in Japan?
The animated one, then the Japan one too.
Okay.
Which was kind of cheesy, but something about that costume when I saw it on screen. I started picking up books again. I really got into the Dan Slott run, which came out a few years ago. The Nick Spencer run I really enjoyed a lot. But then I was going back and rereading. As I said, I had a couple piecemeal early Spider-Man comics. Nothing very valuable as a kid. Maybe they were in the hundreds, 200s. But then I went back and started reading them again, and I just fell in love with the artwork. Ditko's artwork was just incredible. Stan Lee. Not the greatest writer out there, but I just loved how he took this underdog story of this kid, the everyday kid. And
so quick side note. So it was Ditko and Lee that made Fantasy 15?
Yes.
Okay. So what year was that?
That was 1962.
Okay. So here's my side note for that. Vampirella is my jam, but Vampirella was 69 and Spider-Man was 62.
Yeah.
I'll put some things right here as demonstration. Vampirella has some of the worst writing I've ever read. As in nonsensical assembly of words.
Yeah.
So I do want to give Stan Lee a little bit of credit.
Yes.
Because I feel like people pick on him.
Yes.
And I pick on him more for the career stuff, the credit that he took that might not have been all his. But I do want to give Lee a little bit of credit, because I read some of his you read Daredevil 1 or Hulk 1 or whatever. It's flipping Shakespeare compared to these other images. Please pause and read this nonsense. It's incomprehensible. But so I do want to give him a little bit of credit for at least being a competent writer. Yeah. At the least, we can give him that.
Absolutely. And I think that the really cool thing about Stan too was just how groundbreaking he was with characters. I mean, he had
superheroes and problems.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Peter Parker was a kid that had, all these issues going through, being a teenager, as you read the story, kind of being responsible for his uncle's death.
Sure.
That's a little harsh, but it kind of was. But, then you've got Iron Man, who was kind of the Batman equivalent, I would say, for Marvel. But, going through a drinking problem, having this issue of really trying to be himself.
Is that gone, by the way, from current content? Is Iron Man, he's okay.
Yes.
Okay. So if anyone's ever met an alcoholic before, you could meet them 25 years in recovery, and they will still introduce themselves as an alcoholic. That's just how recovery works. You're always the thing, but you're always moving past it. If you hear a dog, there's a cute doggy. I will show you a video, I promise.
He's a DC fan.
He's furious about all of this.
Yeah.
But no, if anyone knows an alcoholic, you know that they're always they're like it's a part of their identity now, and it's not a bad thing. That's part of their journey. Is he now like does he never talk about it again, or is it just God? Okay,
Yeah.
that kind of sucks. I thought that could lead to like maybe like, oh wow, the writers are so progressive and good, but
Yes.
no, he's healed everybody. There's
Yeah.
no such thing as alcoholism anymore.
Yes.
Iron Man fixed it.
Yeah, but even besides Iron Man, Daredevil, losing his sight as a kid, losing his dad, who was a prize fighter, who obviously was told to throw a fight. He didn't. He was killed by a mobster. And then when I really gravitate, Daredevil's my second favorite character because I really just love how he has inner turmoil too between his dad's death, losing his eyesight, being a devout Catholic. He goes to church a lot, and then having
Built-in guilt.
Yes, so
Sure.
having to deal with that side of things too, and then try to beat the crap out of.
So and even the Fantastic Four, like although just a moment ago I was thinking like, well, they seem to have escaped tragedy, but like the Thing is the receptacle for all of that team's tragedy.
Yep.
So he still managed to work in that character that's like, it sucks to be a superhero.
True. And then I know you saw my copy of Fantastic Four 48 there. This Man, This Monster, which is an iconic cover of the Thing.
Kirby.
Yes, Kirby art, but just looking at this character who you would think, okay, he's a superhero, he gets, all the perks. But when he goes home at night and sits down, he's dealing with a lot of things. He looks at himself as this, flawed individual. So that's what I really liked about Stan Lee. And then from there, Black Panther, Blade, all these characters coming out that Stan was like, we need to make Marvel an entity where everybody, whether you have a disability, a person of color, a woman,
Sure.
you can go to Marvel.
Was Blade Lee, or was that like a character he facilitated?
Yes. But he
made it a safe place to make characters like
Black
that.
Panther was the one that led that route.
Okay, you're 60 years old. You have accomplished the goal that you have today. What is the goal you're working towards? What's that gold medal?
It's a tough one because I like runs. I like getting a lot of runs together, and I'm 2 issues away from completing the 1 through 50 run. I'm missing Amazing Spider-Man 1, which I know someone who has potentially a copy. Might find out more today.
That's exciting.
And number 9, I sold it a few years ago. I sold my Amazing Spider-Man 9 First Electro.
What was it? Was it a graded?
Yes.
And?
It was a high grade. It was a 7.0.
Wowee. Okay, and that's like what, like a 5? Like 5, like today?
Yeah, it's
sure.
worth a lot. So that's the other thing I think which is important to know about comic collecting is you make mistakes, you learn along the way, you like different things. So I beat myself up a little bit on collecting, but then also when I started, I was like, I'm going to go for the keys. I'm going to get this one. You look at comic book websites. Oh, today this character is the hot one. They're going to do a movie about. I'm going to buy 2 copies of it and I'm going to get them graded. Mm. That isn't collecting. And I think what I found is there's it's the same with music or whatever you like. You're going to like different things. I'm as you can tell, big Marvel fan. But I collect DC too. I enjoy the Batman. Batman's a great character. I picked up some keys recently. My comic collection is eclectic, which I like. I can go to different characters. But for me, going back to Spider-Man, I think obviously the Grail is the AF-15. I would like to have that down the road. So I think my plan overall would maybe, I'd like to complete the 1 through 50 run. I've got quite a few issues 50 onwards too, so kind of complete that up. And then, maybe in 10 years, look at getting that AF-15 and having that be my one and only Spider-Man.
Now this is a sensitive question, so please send the children out of the room. What is the lowest acceptable grade for saying this AF-15? Because I'm assuming you get an AF-15, and that would be that you're not going to try to upgrade it. No. Like you'd sit on that book forever, because upgrading it is even 10 grand a pop.
Yes.
So like, what is the lowest acceptable grade when you say that's the one, I'm done, I don't need another one?
If it's got a cover, I'll take it, even if it's a 0.5.
Okay, so like a 0.5 with like chunks off the back, or sure.
Yeah,
okay, so you're not looking for perfection, you're looking for the book.
No, absolutely. And I think it's hard. I'd like to. I have a lot of graded books. I know Ricky and I've talked a lot about the
I didn't know shit about grading books until this started. I didn't know nothing about it.
Yeah, grading. I think And there's a couple of schools of thought. People like collecting, raw books. Some people like collecting slabs. I do both. I think I don't want to be in one camp. I don't want to be just solely getting books for a specific reason.
Sure.
I get these graded because I've got the trades, so I can read the early copies. I'm very clumsy. I've actually ruined a couple books in the past. Not huge keys, but
sure.
But I like to read those and not worry about it. But then I have the grades for display. I've got a really cool display up there that I do.
Right.
So
I'd rather bust a slab than a book.
Yeah, but for the A15, I think I'd like whatever I can get, whether it be a graded book or whether it be a raw book. I would sell whatever it is.
Sure.
I just think that book transcends what it is.
It's cultural at this point.
And I think we've talked about this a bit before too, but the flaws in the book make there's a lot of character to it.
Right.
So I wouldn't like to get an AF15 that's a high grade because it hasn't lived. That book hasn't been in a kid's room that's been dropped. That's, he's put it in his back pocket. He's driven his bike. There's a stamp on it from the store that you bought it from. That's cool.
Date stamps I love date
that's
stamps.
Cool. I've got a bunch of books like that. So so that would be my goal, is the AF15.
Well, they have there's a book I've been looking at right now. I'm gonna adjust this camera because I don't like it. Have I been tilted this whole time? You'll tell me. No, you won't. There's a book I've been looking at lately. The Promise collection.
Yeah.
For those of you, I'll again box here, pause it, read. There were two brothers in it was the Korean War. There were two brothers before the Korean War, I believe. One of them went off to war, and he said, if I pass away, I want you, my living brother, to sell the rest of my collection. And I'm going to, now that I'm taking that down, it's gone. Now I'm putting up a new picture. This is, I'll show you after. It's the first appearance of Robin, Tech 37 or whatever. First appearance of Robin, cover's beautiful. It is held together with duct tape and love, this book. But it's from the Promise collection. It's a first appearance of Robin, and you'll see it here. It is a brutal copy. But when you take into context that story of these two brothers, and they're bringing this book to their treehouse, they're running around the neighborhood waving it because they like Robin so much. It's not a thing. But the back of my crypto book, another photo. This area is getting crowded. There's a kid that signed it on the thing on the back to practice a signature.
That's awesome.
I love that stuff. So,
that is cool.
Much ado. You're here to see books. You don't want to see two nerds just waxing poetic. So this is exciting. So where are we starting?
So I pulled a few of my mini Spider-Man books that are graded. I have some rolls over there too. But actually, let me go backwards. I'll work my way backwards. So the first out of these that I got from the 1 through 50 run graded was this one, which is the Amazing Spider-Man 31, graded 8.0. This is the first appearance of Gwen Stacy, the original Gwen Stacy, which was Spider-Man's, Peter Parker's girlfriend. It's different from the current Gwen Stacy, who is from a different universe. But this is her first appearance, as well as Harry Osborn, the son of Norman Osborn, who you may or may not know. Spoiler, is Green Goblin. So, picked this one up. Really, it wasn't that expensive. This was maybe around 2013, 14, before the Marvel movies kind of pushed these up. So as you can see, it's a pretty clean copy, and I just love the story. This is when Peter goes to college, and he's left high school, so he's starting to grow up a bit more, and he meets Harry and Gwen, and this meeting kind of leads us to a couple of really controversial storylines which come up down the road. First one obviously is Harry Osborn drug addiction. Again, a story where you're reading comics and then you have a main character that is going through drug addiction. So that's really, really hard. And then, of course, Gwen Stacy, the first character in Marvel, main character to die a really horrible death, which is regarded as one of the most shocking stories.
Hot take. Is this the new Gwen Stacy's first appearance? Do you consider this the new Gwen Stacy's first appearance, or are they such separate characters that the new one is the new one and this one is the old one?
I don't consider her to be the same character, because they're totally different. So
interesting.
This Gwen was more...
Because I've noticed this book price is not crazy. And I thought that was nuts.
Yes,
Like
it
her
is.
9.8s of her new book are going for like $500, and then you can get this one raw
Yeah.
for like $4. And I was just
Yeah.
like, why aren't people?
Yeah, I've got both first appearances. I've got this Gwen Stacy first appearance, and I've got Edge of Spider-Verse 2, the Gwen Stacy who becomes Spider-Gwen, who becomes Ghost Spider, who's the Gwen Stacy that most people now know from the latest movies. So I see them as different characters. Obviously, this Gwen dies, so it's not the same one. Spoiler: she does come back. As with comics, nobody's ever really did. But I consider this the first appearance of that Gwen Stacy. So I kind of see them as two separate entities. But I just love having this book. Again, Gwen gets a lot of the accolades, but again, Harry Osborn becomes this really complex character. Good friend of Peter. They share a room together. They share a apartment together.
Okay.
But then, Harry is this troubled kid who's got a dad who is this hard-ass businessman. He doesn't know that his dad is the Green Goblin. Eventually that comes out down the road, but it's really interesting to see that one of Spider-Man's main villains is the father of one of his best friends. And there's a great storyline, I've got the book I can show a bit later, where the big reveal happens, where Norman, as the Green Goblin, sees Peter Parker on the street looking down at him. He's like, "You're Spider-Man." And Peter gets shocked, seeing that the Green Goblin has noticed him, but Green Goblin takes off his mask, and he sees, oh my, it's my best friend's dad. So there's that double reveal.
Very Shakespearean.
Yes. So that was really, really awesome. So yeah, so Gwen Stacy, I see that as this being two Gwen Stacy's. This one and then the Edge of Spider-Verse version. So I think on eBay, I don't know how people are really selling this. What are they listing it as? Are they listing it as
so if you get like a raw anywhere between 3.5 to 5,
yeah,
you're looking at a ceiling of $500.
Yeah,
like it's not that expensive.
Yeah, and I know, I think obviously the comic pricing has gone through the roof. It's hit this.
It's coming down now. It's coming down. Thank God.
Yeah,
because I only make so much money a year.
True.
And eggs are wild right now. So I don't want to give up.
I think where it is at right now is the affordable copy. So for anyone who's interested in getting the book, I think it's a good time to buy it. But again, don't buy it for the MCU. She's not in the MCU. Maybe eventually down the road, but don't buy it for the spec. That's one thing. Comic collecting the spec thing is really tough, and you get a lot of people that buy comics for different reasons. But buy it for the love of the character. I would suggest reading some of the early stories of this Gwen, and then seeing how you feel about this character, especially reading when she dies, looking at that situation, how that death affects Peter Parker, because it's very important that he became a superhero. Obviously from the spider bite, but he left the door open where this criminal ran through and then ultimately killed his uncle who he was living with. So that was a big motivator for him to become a superhero. Then moving on, he goes through various ups and downs where he wants to be Spider-Man, doesn't, but when the issue comes up where Gwen passes away, it's a key moment, not only because it's a death of his love interest, but he's a superhero now. He's supposed to prevent this. And in his arms, there's a debate about whether the fall killed her or him catching her killed her.
And is that just because I know as much about Spider-Man as anybody else who watched the animated series on Fox. That's my knowledge base of Spider-Man. Is this the second time since his uncle's death that he's directly involved with the death?
Yes.
So it was, and this is what, issue 31. Okay,
she doesn't die in that one. That's her first appearance.
Okay, so then when did she die?
Yeah, she dies in 129.
Lord, so it's
So
years and years later that he experiences that failure again.
Yeah, and there's kind of there's kind of the Archie comics tie-in, which is a weird one, but Peter is back and forth between Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy. It's like he's kind of the Archie in that relationship. So ultimately, I think reading the comics, you see him gravitate more towards Mary Jane. I think there's more of that connection, but he does date Gwen, and he does have a relationship with her. And at the time when she dies, that is when he is really infatuated with her a lot. So that's that extra But he's also conflicted too because it's the point where he's like, I like her, I'm infatuated, but I think Mary Jane's the one. So I think there's that extra guilt. So there's a lot of this guilt that comes in with Spider-Man. It's just amazing how you see the complex. You know, it's a comic book. You know, and a lot of people say comics are just about superheroes. You hear a lot of people talking about that. Some famous directors, Scorsese, saying these things. Which, you know, if you watch the movie, sure. But if you really look at these characters and really look at the plot lines and the storyline, there's a lot going into this, you know. So it's really amazing. You look at flawed characters like Dr. Octopus, you know, all these characters, Norman Osborn, the Kingpin, another great villain. There's a lot of complexity behind these characters. So, but I'll move on to my next one. This one, I'm not a fan of this character, but I have the book because it's part of obviously the first 20 issue run, which is very iconic. Kraven the Hunter, wearing his iconic, I don't know what he's sheathed
Met Gala kind of.
Yes, the Met Gala. Yeah, actually true. He would be good at the Met Gala. So Kraven's first appearance. I
really like the way they drew. Is this Ditko again?
Yes.
I really like the black all over him.
Yeah.
And how it's stretching. I like the movement of that. It's definitely stuck to him.
Yeah, that's a great book, and I appreciate what they were looking at with this character, kind of coming up with looking at somebody from Eastern Europe. They didn't go with the stereotypical, you know, Russian character that's going to be military. You know, this character had some this background of being a hunter, obviously by the name, but he's actually grown on me a bit. I think his first appearances were kind of, you know, this big hunter's coming to the U.S. He becomes you know, he doesn't like Spider-Man, and they kind of go into these fights. But Kraven's Last Stand, there's a couple of really good Kraven runs, and there's actually a new in the latest series. There's a couple of really interesting issues with him. So I think the character's grown a little bit more. He's got a daughter now that is kind of taking over his empire. So he's dealing with that. So I think the character is better now than in that incarnation. So I would look at Kraven's Last Hunt as the really
and the second appearance of the Chameleon, because the first was in Spider-Man 1.
Amazing Spider-Man 1, yes. So if you're looking for the first appearance of the Chameleon, if you're a big fan of that character who definitely played a big part in Spider-Man history moving forward, he appears in number 1. Then I would say my favorite Spider-Man villain is this one, which would be obviously Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. Really love this cover. The Enforcers on there, the wonderful Enforcers who first appear in issue 10, don't really do much of the storyline. They're kind of thugs. But what I really like about this book too is that you have old friend Bruce Banner as the Hulk appearing on the cover too. So you
is it like a B story, or is he in the story?
He's got a little bit of a cameo in there. It doesn't really play a lot into the storyline, but just the iconic nature of Norman Osborn being in here, and you know, not the highest graded book, but I really do. I think it's a clean copy.
4.5.
Yeah.
Off white to white.
I would say.
Do you care about page quality? Is it a pleasant bonus?
It's a hard one. I know the really, you know, persnickety collectors, you know, look down on cream cover books. But again, you know, some of these iconic books, if you find a book in good quality, you know, if it's cream, off-white, whatever it is, it's not really going to hamper it too much. I mean, I just like the cover of it too, and if, you know, the cover's relatively clean on that one, but really great storyline. You know, Norman obviously continues to play a big part as a nemesis and a villain for Spider-Man. He goes to various incarnations.
Oh, his Rocket looks so dorky.
Yes.
I didn't realize. I guess I never really spent enough time looking at that cover.
Yes.
But that Rocket he's like it's like a Wicked Witch of the West kind of deal.
Not a good.
And with him being green, I wonder if that was some sort of.
That's true. That could be, yeah.
Green and on a broom and.
Yep.
I'll get you, my Spidey.
Yeah, and obviously green and purple.
And I'll sleep with your girlfriend too.
Sure. And green and purple are the same colors as the character to his right wears. So.
Oh, Hulk!
Hulk is in his jean shorts, the purple
and his
shorts.
and his flat top.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see the color connections, and especially certain colors pop, certain don't, and a lot of the early Marvel characters, as we saw on some of my posters, Daredevil initially was yellow, Hulk was initially gray, Tony Stark was gray too. Well, Iron Man. So it's interesting that their first appearances, they're not the character that they become as far as the look too. So that was an interesting look. Next one I have, this is my lowest graded one. I still don't know why it got the grade it did. I'm really trying to figure it out. But this,
and of course, they left you copious notes that were clear.
Yeah. So this one is the first appearance of the one and only Dr. Otto Octavius in Amazing Spider-Man 3. So
this is my favorite, just from cartoons and limited knowledge.
Yes.
This is my favorite villain. I think he's cool.
I think as far as characters portrayed in the live action movies too, I really like what Alfred Molina did with the character.
Yes.
I really wish they had gone down more, done a standalone movie of him.
It's got to be the holes in the.
Yeah. So
there's a couple scrapes in the cover.
I think the problem that I have with this character is
is it someone with a punch hole?
Yes.
Yeah, like a diamond, like a little. But again, a kid here.
But
look at that.
Again, it's a.
Look at the diamond shapes that are so consistent. That's a kid with a punch hole.
Yep, and then on the back you've got a tear across there with some tape.
I'm gonna find that 50-year-old and beat him up for ruining your book.
But the nice thing about it is that book, it lived in a kid's room. He got home from school, he looked at it, he obviously did some bad things to the book, but it's well loved. I
have to say my one immediate comment on these books is the backs suck.
Yeah.
It's the same. Is it the same on all of them over and over?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
So
That sucks.
If you want to learn how to draw, I wonder how many kids actually you could cut out the stamp and then.
They were really looking for cheap labor, and so it was they were like, kids are already reading the books. It's an untapped market.
Westport, Connecticut. Yep. So Otto Octavius to me, the problem I have is I think the costume is ludicrous.
The green jumpsuit.
No, the arms. I get. I know it may seem
part.
weird. I just don't like the like kind of the cummerbund like little sucking in his stomach that holds the arms.
He folds over the sides. He's a muffin top.
I like the character, but I don't know how they could have done it differently. That still bugs me a little.
Can anything that lives defeat him? Good Lord, he's like a dumpy scientist with robot arms.
With the worst hair. He has the worst hair. There's a debate about Norman Osborn versus Otto Octavius, who has the worst hairstyle.
Norman's is just a weird. It's a weird drawing.
He's got kind of the cornrows, or almost, and then Otto's got the kind of the Beatles cut forward. So I think it's been really hard for when they do the live action to kind of make these as accurate as possible in the because
you can't translate everything.
Yeah, Willem Dafoe didn't really have that hair. And neither did Alfred Molina. But, great characters. I think Otto, if you want a really, really good storyline, Superior Spider-Man is a really great series where he takes over as Spider-Man. They kind of switch minds. That's a really, really good run.
Now, you didn't beat the game.
No.
It's a retelling of Peter's relationship with Dr. Otto Octavius before he becomes that.
Oh, okay.
So, in a 25 to 30 hour game, probably 25, I'll be generous. In a 25-hour game, probably like 20 hours of it is him being a surrogate father figure and super supportive. And it's in the last 5 hours that he goes bonkers. And then it's legitimate. Okay. It's so good. If you like that character, maybe that's why I like him so much. It's not just the Fox stuff. I love the video games.
And the other thing about him too is he does ultimately marry Aunt May.
Okay.
So they get
in
married.
Peter's body, making it weird.
No, not that, not there yet. But he does marry her. So he does become what would the
step uncle?
Yeah.
Now it is Shakespearean. Good
so
God.
So that again another nemesis of Peter's. Go really encroaching into his life and his livelihood and taking the another character that's key to him, Aunt May, and making her fall in love with him. So Peter goes through.
And Venom was a coworker.
A lot. Yep.
Competitive coworker that he ends up beating.
This may be an unpopular opinion for Spider-Man fans, but I do not like the character of Venom. it's a character that
I mean, okay,
not
so
a
you
fan
don't
of.
like the design, you
I
don't
do
like
not
Eddie
like
Brock.
I don't like Eddie Brock. I think they've done a disservice to the character. Obviously, you know, with Sony doing the movies, the movie was terrible. But I don't know. The character doesn't do it for me, and I think Spider-Man, when you start to bring in the symbiote side of things, that takes it away from what it was meant to be, which is the kid on the streets of New York City, going through his daily life. I mean, you've got some characters that come in as these nemesis and arch foes, but they're not supernatural almost. And I think bringing that side of things in, it just takes it away.
Well, who was it? Was it Slott? Who was it that made drew attention to the fact that his villains are all animals on a totem?
Yeah,
I remember reading that.
Yeah,
I think that was around the time that he had joined the Avengers. So whenever that year was, I'll look it up here. We haven't used this space in a while. I'll look it up. But I remember someone commenting on what is it? It's a rhino, a vulture, an octopus.
Yep.
Just a bunch of animals, and then who's the one that doesn't fit? And Electro. You know, that animal, the Electro.
Yes, it's the
he should have been the eel.
Yes. Ooh. Maybe it was the eel Electro.
Yeah, there it is.
All right, and then so as close as I'm gonna get so far is Amazing Spider-Man #2, featuring the one and only Vulture, Adrian Toomes.
Now, quick question, did Spider-Man have a second appearance in Amazing Fantasy? Was it just AF-15 and then they moved on to somebody else?
Yes, AF-15, they did AF-15 and then
one.
Yes, because they saw that the character was worthy of having his own.
So then this is his third appearance.
This is his third appearance.
Okay.
So I have, again, grading, I'm not, it's a 3.0, but again, this is an iconic
cares?
book. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple chips on it, but I really like the cover. It's, again, weird choice of a character, being a guy in a vulture suit. Like, I wonder what was going through Stanley's mind when he's like, okay, we're going to start off.
It was just animals. Spider-Man, Vulture Man, Chameleon
first
Man.
One.
Yeah.
So, he comes in, he starts off, he robs a bank. Spider-Man's, out, he's sort of getting used to being this new superhero. And then the really cool thing about him is that they're, looking for him down on the ground, but he obviously flies in, swoops in, gets the cash out of the bank. I don't think there's really been a good representation of this character in comics. They've tried over the years to do some storylines with him.
No, White Pages?
Yeah, White Pages. Fun fact on this book, I actually traded for this book. I had a Tomb of Dracula 9.4 first appearance of Blade, and there was a guy on eBay who had this book, and I asked him if we could just switch and trade, and he said sure. So I really wanted this in my collection. Again, not really seeing any great storylines. If you're interested in learning more about the Spider-Man universe and really going back, I'd say get the first trade, and you can read about in the first 1 through 15, you'll get to read a lot of first appearances with these characters. Adrian Toomes doesn't really play a big part recently. There's some storylines. He was played really well by Batman in
Keaton. It's so weird. My mother-in-law is staying with us for the weekend. Don't worry, she's not terrible and she likes me. And she was like, I've never seen. She's bring it in. She grew up with the Beatles. Like, she saw the Beatles. I think she's 73 now. She saw the Beatles like 3 times.
Wow.
Yes, she said the second and the third time you literally couldn't hear them. It was just washing of screaming. But still, she got to go and see him. But she's got that like fangirl in her, and she comes to us with these random celebrity relationships that she's fascinated with. And so Tom Holland and Zendaya is one she's fascinated with, and she knew all about them, but she had never seen the movie. So just last night we were like, let's watch it together. It was a good time. Helen forgot that it's not an origin story.
Yes.
And and it was so funny. You could see it dawn on her face. She's like, wait, they're not telling it how he became Spider-Man. I was like, well, no, because you know. And she just the realization of like, oh, we can just skip it.
Yeah.
This is lovely. Now we need to do that with Batman. Like, return to the
Yes,
trauma for
there's a
sure.
lot of, yeah,
I don't need to see it
stories
again.
we don't need to
Those
see.
poor Waynes have died so many times. I don't need to see them gunned down
Yeah,
again. And then so these are absolutely beautiful. I'll show some. I've been showing footage this entire time of the rest of the Spider-Man collection. They're amazing. Gun to your head. Do you have a favorite? Do you have one right now that I make the joke on this is my channel, but I make my joke on my videos like you're gonna be King Tut buried.
Yes.
With one of them. The rest can be sold. Is there anything that you can't get rid of?
I think the Amazing Spider-Man 14, the first appearance of Green Goblin, that would be the one for now. Out of my collection that I have 1 through 50, I think that one for me is just that iconic one, because that's the villain that means the most in that universe, that has this relationship with Peter. He kills his girlfriend. His son is Peter's best friend.
And he's still around now.
Yes.
Thunderbolts, right?
Yes, and he goes through various incarnations. I'd love to see a Norman Osborn movie. I think Willem Dafoe did a great job portraying him, but I think, throughout the years, there's certain villains. I think he is Peter Parker's Joker equivalent to Batman.
See, I was thinking, and not to disagree with the expert, but I was thinking like if Spider-Man is not analogous to Superman, but Osborn is absolutely analogous to Luthor.
Yes.
This shrewd businessman who is not afraid to throw on a suit and throw down.
Yep.
I dig that.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's unpredictability about the character too. Like one day, actually, in the current run that is out right now, they're actually working together, Norman and Peter, which is a little odd. But I just think there's so much depth to the character. You don't know what you're going to get with him. You walk in each day, you see him in a panel, you see him like talking to Harry. I love you, Harry, you're my son. The next panel he walks in, Harry is, on drugs, and you get to see this look in his eyes is like this evilness. There's this unpredictability about him, which I really love. So I definitely take that one. The other one, which is over there too, is the first appearance of the Kingpin. And the problem I have with the Kingpin, I love the character. I think he's awesome. I think he's been portrayed really well by Vincent D'Onofrio on the movies and in the Daredevil show. He is more of a Daredevil villain. So, he kind of shares book time and screen time between Spider-Man and Daredevil. I think he works better as a Daredevil villain for a variety of reasons. Matt Murdock being a lawyer, obviously Kingpin is...
He skates on crime a lot, yeah.
But obviously, Amazing Spider-Man 50 was the first appearance of Wilson Fisk as the Kingpin. Great cover too.
That's interesting.
Yes.
That Spider-Man's the first appearance, but he's the main villain for a guy who's in another book.
So I'd say I like the villains a lot. I think Peter Parker's great, but I really gravitate towards some of these villains too. So I'd say gun to my head, I'd keep Norman. Second one would be the Kingpin. Those two books for me just represent, out of that 1 through 50 run, just something about them. The covers are great, but just those characters too. And like, this is their first appearance in this book. As a kid, I could just imagine being back in the 60s, going to a comic book store, opening it up, and you just see this hulking man with this bald head, and like, wow, who's this? That's something if I could time travel, I would love to go back to that time, walk into a store, pick up a comic book, and just open that page and just see those characters. So those two for me would be the ones I'd love to.
Well, we love words here, and that's the definition of nostalgia. It's the pain over things that are gone.
Yep.
So it's like we've replaced the word nostalgia with like a fun feeling.
Yeah.
But the real feeling of nostalgia is like you go to your parents' house, they don't live here anymore, and you can only look at it from the street.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. And I think the problem that we find now with, obviously it's a bit different with comic books because they are still brick and mortar comic stores, is I think growing up as a kid, and that from you grow up and you remember the time you actually bought this book. You can go back. I was at the store. I used to go to a comic store as a kid. Which I'll talk a bit more about in one of the other videos about some international books, but you remember buying some of these books a lot too, where you were. Nowadays, you'll go to a store, you find a book, but also comic conventions, you'll be flipping through a bin and, oh, I need this one. unfortunately, a lot of the books that we own, we get off eBay because of the convenience, whatnot, Macari, etc. You don't have the story attached to them too much, too. So you love the book, and you get that feeling like, oh, I'm getting this book, but you didn't really have to work hard for it. All you had to do was buy it now, or
right.
a bit. So that takes a bit away from these books. So I think, those. I love all these books, but I think we'll all gravitate more towards those books that we find. I have that Amazing Spider-Man 47, which you can show in your panoramic. That one, I actually bought raw at Rhode Island Comic Con in 2019. And I was at a comic stand, and I met this guy. I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but really nice older gentleman. He's like, hey, what do you collect? Spider-Man. He's like, I got some books for you. And he wasn't trying to upsell me. He was a true collector, and I'd really liked him. He's like, I've got this basement, and I have my collection. And he brought out these books, and there was a lot of books from the 1 through 50 run, really well preserved. That book is really well preserved. And he's like, you know what? I love this character, and and it's really hard for me. I'm getting older, and I want to give my collection to a good home. And when I hear somebody say that, that's what really draws me to those books. So that book, while it's the second appearance of Kraven, it's not worth a lot. But when I look at it, I always think about that guy. And I'm like, you know what? I got that book for a decent price from a guy who loves the comics as much as I do. I didn't go to a vendor who's like, okay, $200, $300, give me that book. Here we go. Give me your cash. What do you got? That was from a guy who was giving it. He wanted to give it to a good home. And I told him too. I said to him, I'm going to take this home. I'm probably going to grade it because I like to grade my 1 through 50s, and it's going to have a prominent display in my collection. It's going to join the other. And that's that. I think that's the feeling. I think you get that too. Of
I try.
Yeah,
I try. And sometimes I'll buy a book online. Like I thought. Side note. I thought that on Whatnot I would be able to get that through the internet finally.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can, but like just the other day, I bought I don't know, I think it was my first Atom for a screaming deal, and I told the guy, I was like, hey, just so you're aware, this is going to its forever home. Like until I've Pokemon evolved into that old man who's like, I'm just getting rid of the stuff because I had my fun with it. It's time to move on. I can't take it to the grave. Yeah. Until I evolve into that point, I'm going to have this book in my collection, and I'm going to take care of it. And he was just like, yeah, it's great. Up next. And then he just went to the next book. So you can try. Sometimes you get that feeling, and they're like, oh, I don't want to sell it, but like, it sounds like you're a nice guy. Yeah. The digital age has definitely robbed us of that person-to-person, nerd-to-nerd.
True.
Okay, so final question on the Spider-Man stuff. Do you remember your first Spider-Man issue? Do you remember what it was that you read? Or as close as you can remember?
It was in the 200s. I don't remember exactly. It was kind of it wasn't the first Goblin appearance. It was one just before that. I remember picking it up. I used to go to a bookstore as a kid called Estheril Books, which was at a mall in Pretoria, South Africa, run by an older couple, really nice. And I remember picking it up, and I don't remember the story offhand. I should, but I don't. But it was just great. You walk into that store and you look around, and your eye gravitates towards the pop of the color. At that time, as I said earlier, we didn't have complete runs. So I'd pick up a Spider-Man, a Batman, Archie comic. We don't talk about Archie comics here, but I had a big Archie comic collection as a kid. I sold that for $10.
I just want Sabrina.
Sabrina is great. I like her as a character. But yeah, I just remember that feeling that you had of like getting the comic, going home on a Wednesday, and just reading it, and just being immersed in that storyline, and that character. So for me, I think as a kid, unfortunately, I grew up in a country that had a lot of political strife, too, which is a whole nother story. But we had bans and boycotts, and certain things weren't allowed in the country in the 70s and 80s. So we got piecemeal things here or there. So that was part of it too. You'd get some books, some TV shows, some episodes, some movies, but it wasn't as the continuity wasn't there. So you kind of would fall out of the habit of getting those books.
Well, it's really easy to forget with American exceptionalism being what it is, that like this is This isn't a true blue American art form.
Yeah.
I mean, the comic strip, you could go back to like, manga, like Japan. Like everybody was drawing pictures and going, look. But like the sequential panels, and then especially the superhero genre, it's specifically America. So when you go out of the country back in the 50s and 60s and 40s and 30s, if it wasn't being brought from America, it wasn't going over there. Yeah. So it is something to be appreciative of on 4th of July weekend, to remember that although this doesn't seem patriotic, it's ostensibly very apatriotic. No, this is our culture. If you are American watching this. Okay, well, thank you for showing me this stuff.
You're welcome.
I definitely want to see way more of what you have. So we'll be back with Gunter in the future, I promise. But yeah, thanks for showing us your collection.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
I hope everybody out there gets what they deserve.